thank you so much for speaking with us today about Monday's supermoon. I'm sure it's going to be a beautiful sight, but can you start off by telling us what is so special about this particular supermoon?
Yeah, so what makes this particular supermoon special is that it will be the closest the moon has been to the Earth since 1948. As we know, the orbit of the moon around the Earth is not a perfect circle, and the moon does get closer in its orbit. And so Monday morning, the moon will be at perigee. It'll be closest to the moon. It'll be 14% larger than the average full moon, and it'll be the closest we've had in quite a long time.
Great. So how often do supermoons happen, and why is this one considered especially rare?
Yeah, so the word supermoon's been used a lot. By the definition we like to discuss, it's the one closest full moon of the year. And so this particular one on Monday will be the closest of this year. And again, it will be historically close. It hasn't been this close since January of 1948. And it won't be this close again until November of 2034. So not only will it be larger in the sky, but brighter and closer than it has been in quite a long time.
And so what causes the variations in the distance between the Earth and the Moon?
Yeah, so there's a lot of factors that go into making the moon's orbit not a perfect circle. And actually all objects that orbit other things in the solar system follow similarly imperfect circular orbits. One of the main reasons why the orbit of the moon is not a perfect circle is that there are a lot of tidal or gravitational forces that are pulling on the moon, whether you have the gravity of the Earth pulling on the moon, you have the gravity of the Sun, and actually all of the other planets, Jupiter slightly tugging the orbit of the moon. So the moon's orbit is not a perfect circle for many factors. And actually the fact that the Earth has this beautiful ocean covering 70% of it also affects some of the orbit of the moon around it, because the ocean's moving around, and so you have all of these different gravitational forces pulling and pushing on the moon, which give us these opportunities to have these close passes.
So will there be any noticeable differences in the tides or any other kind of effects on the Earth with this supermoon?
Sure. So the moon does affect the Earth's surface and the Earth's oceans as well. We will see a slightly higher tide. We normally get a high tide at close moons. But this one will be, again, not perceptively higher, but certainly a little bit higher. Actually, one of the interesting things about the moon is that it's not only pulling on the Earth's ocean, it's actually pulling on the Earth's crust. The Earth's crust, the land beneath our feet, actually deforms in response to the moon as well. But again, these are very subtle effects that we wouldn't necessarily notice unless you were actually looking at them or measuring them.
So do you know what is the closest supermoon on record, and can you kind of compare that to the average distance between the Earth and the Moon?
Sure. So over the span of at least recent history, the last several hundred years, this is going to be one of the closest, but there have been closer ones. The closest supermoon, the closest full moon that we had was in January of 1912, and that was about 100 or just under 100 kilometers closer than the full moon that we'll have on Monday. So again, we're not talking thousands of kilometers difference between these very close, these supermoons, but we know the distance to the moon very well, and so we know that this is going to be one of the closest, but not the closest. The moon will be closer than it is on Monday in November of 2034. But historically, the moon's distance to the Earth hasn't changed dramatically over at least human existence, but we do get these close full moons periodically, and again, it has been over 60 years since the last one. But the moon's distance to the Earth is in the order of about 230 million miles, and so we're not talking about dramatic shifts in distance, but we're talking about subtle differences that are noticeable if you're used to looking at the moon.
So for sky watchers who might want to go look at the moon with a telescope and kind of see more features on the moon, is there a certain time that would be best to look?
Sure. So actually looking at the full moon through a telescope is probably not the optimal time to be looking for surface features. I would never tell anyone not to look at the moon, so if you've got your telescope, definitely take it out on Sunday night or Monday morning or Monday night to look at the moon. But certainly there are amazing features that you can see anytime the moon is up. Ideally, when the moon is a crescent moon or not full, you'll actually get the effect of shadows on the moon that allow you to see the beautiful and subtle topography of the lunar surface, the beautiful impact craters that are much more apparent when the sun is not or the moon is not full.
And so is the moon going to be at its fullest at the same time that it is at its closest?
Okay, so we have to wrap up here, but the full moon occurs about 2 hours, just under 2 hours after close approach. Closest approach is going to be about 6:30 in the morning on Monday, and the full moon actually occurs about 9 a.m. Eastern, just before 9 a.m. Eastern. So they occur very close to each other, but not as coincidentally. But Monday morning it'll be full and closest approach.
Great, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.